short-term impacts in the U.S. on energy security, which is really troubling. And then for some folks, we're going to have food security issues, not necessarily here in the United States, but some folks are going to have some difficulty getting food. Longer term, just looking at what's going on. So this renewable diesel is a big deal. Basically, right now, we have enough capacity that's being developed that we would use every single pound of soybean oil we produce in the United States. Okay, so we'd actually end up being short. I told you the price doubled. They're still making the renewable diesel guys, their margins are still fantastic. If we took all of our soybeans, put it into renewable diesel, we still wouldn't be able to meet that capacity. But we want soybean oil for a lot of things, right? We want oil seeds for a lot of things, and so that leads to questions about, how do we reformulate? How do we do all these things with these higher value products? The other thing that's really neat too, to think about this bigger system impact of what's happening with, crush. We now have all this feed available. That's really fantastic. So if we look at what happened, with distillers grains, with corn ethanol, now with a soybean crush plant in the state, we have other oilseed crush. We're having additional feedstocks. And so is that an opportunity to bring more animal agriculture to the state? I think so. We've had a lot of difficulty with that the last 5-10 years for, projects have really struggled to get off the ground, which is unfortunate. But that's another potential opportunity. The other thing that goes along with that too, probably the most powerful to me policy or factor in all of this is California's low carbon fuel standard. They've created a price for carbon, which is extremely high, and that has incentivized all sorts of things. It's incentivized existing biofuel refineries to become more efficient, or at least to resubmit their numbers so they can prove to California how carbon efficient they are. It's led to renewable diesel. That's the reason why we're doing that. And then also there's another opportunity called renewable natural gas, and that's where you typically take the manure from a confined animal operation, put it in a digester, create methane. And if you can get that methane to a pipe, and that pipe goes to California, you can create these same credits. So it hasn't happened here because unfortunately our animal agriculture is one different because we run a lot of cow-calf. We don't have a lot of confined animal operations. But we've seen billions of dollars go into the dairy states and the hog states to put in digesters to produce this renewable natural gas. Again, just part of this bigger play, again, part of this ag energy nexus that exists. And again, really, really exciting. And there's a ton more to talk about. So those are kind of my big comments. And again, if anybody wants to chat for an hour or 3 hours, feel free to reach out. I kind of live in this space, and I do have a different perspective. Obviously, Ryan certainly lives in the space too, and Stephanie, does as well. But again, if you have any other questions or want to think about specific opportunities, either to the region or to individual businesses or organizations, I'm happy to chat. So I think time for a few questions.
Yeah, for sure. If anybody has any questions for Dr. Ripplinger, you can submit them online, or you can unmute yourself, or if anybody in person has any questions here. So.
And I mentioned too, Kale, so I'm majority extension appointment, so it's just Dave.
Okay.
Hey, just Dave, I've got a question.
Yes.
We talk a lot, but
yeah.
Looking at the ag energy nexus, how's energy feeling about this? I mean, obviously there's a lot of great stuff, great market for ag. How's the energy sector feeling about the partnership?
Mixed, is that the right term? So the fossil fuel folks, right? They're under threat, generally speaking. They're really concerned about policy primarily as it relates to decarbonization. Within the state, they're very interested, excited to see the value working more with agriculture. Much of this discussion about ag energy is coming from them, because they see these opportunities. They see, and again, the state sees, the Lieutenant Governor's been a major proponent of this, of, hey, let's get this CO2, this biofuel-based CO2 into the Bakken. That's a win for the state. That makes the state look good, which makes petroleum look good. They're looking for customers. So for example, that natural gas pipeline, that would be North Dakota Natural Gas. So they're seeing that win. There's also, somewhat of a political dimension to it, where they see the value in coalitions. which was actually somewhat unique because historically they've been able to kind of do their own thing. Now they're really seeing an opportunity to work more with agriculture. We actually saw this last week. The Empower Commission had 2 meetings. They had their regular monthly meeting here in Fargo, as well as a discussion of ag energy, again, because they see this. The other thing they're concerned about is pipeline. And so pipeline touches rural landowners. Rural landowners might have a bigger connection to ag than they do to fossil fuels. And so that seems like an opportunity. I'd say that they're in the state. I think they're very open for discussion. They're open to developing, building relationships. I think at the state government level, they see all of these different win-wins, which are really unique to North Dakota. And so those are the things that we need to get on the table. And I think in some respects, they're ahead of us with some of these things, because like the natural gas pipeline is kind of coming from them, right? These carbon, the CO2 capturing thing, these came from it initially. Now there's 2 corn ethanol refineries who are right on top of it. Basically every Midwestern corn ethanol refinery is familiar with it, but that came from the oil and gas folks. They were the folks who knew the geology and said, hey, we want to capture CO2 from coal. Hey, we can also do this for biofuels. And I would just mention, I think in terms of engaging with any of those individual groups, or engaging with Empower, or engaging with like the lieutenant governor's kind of the point person on this, they'd love to chat.
Dave, from a project perspective, I'm Dana Peterson with Emerging Prairie. I just joined the team from Washington, D.C. and originally from Kansas.
Mhm.
Other Midwestern states have natural gas infrastructure that's probably a little more spread out across their states. And so I'm very interested in this proposal for a broader network across North Dakota. What do you think have been the lost projects that the state has missed out on because it did not have that in that region?
Yeah, and I'd say it's lost projects and less profitable projects than would have been the case. So if you think about our infrastructure, we have basically our natural gas network was built to either get large amounts of natural gas either through the state or out of the state, or some really small pipe that was there to serve municipalities, right? That's changed a little bit. The corn ethanol guys needed natural gas, so we might build some pipe. Now it's really thinking, we have at least a third of the state that has no service. And again, that's the entire state in general is an agricultural state. You go further west, there might be more animal agriculture, less crop production to some extent. But you can think about that entire space and say, gosh, I can't conduct any project where I have any need for heat, process heat. And so they're completely off the table. I'm working on a project right now that happens to be in Southwest North Dakota, and it's okay because they don't need significant amounts of process heat. But one of the things they're missing is natural gas. They're 40 miles away from a pipe. Their project is not big enough to pay for that much infrastructure. So we knew from the start that certain possibilities were off the table. And again, that exists. And again, if we think broadly about what types of projects we're looking at, if we're looking at additional crush plants, if we're looking at biofuel refineries, you need natural gas. And one of the nice things too about this, and one of the reasons to keep it in state, is because we've seen the tremendous difficulty in building interstate or international pipelines. I think one of the thoughts is, gosh, if we can't get it out of here, let's use it here. And to get it to those other parts of the states. And the math is somewhat mixed, but oftentimes it's easier to build, especially if you have multiple customers or significant load, it's easier to move the gas than it is to move the oil, for example. And so that's really one of the interests. But again, you can think across that Highway 2 tier, that northern tier. Gosh, Rugby, Devils Lake, Lakota, you could have value-added agriculture in any one or all of those communities. We have this an area 5 times the size of Connecticut that doesn't have natural gas, that could easily have natural gas.
Have you seen any economic impact studies on what the potential would be if they put that in?
Not at a high level, but I've worked on a few projects where natural gas is critical. And again, one of the things we might be missing right now is a nitrogen fertilizer plant in the state, or another nitrogen fertilizer plant in the state. Which to me it's a challenge because we have this fossil fuel dimension. And so you're going to have this carbon overhead, but at the same time, we're short globally. We're up to our eyeballs in natural gas in the state. We're a major, agricultural state. I happened to work on some projects almost a decade ago that it's tough to build projects like that. But gosh, to me, just looking at the situation, almost every value added ag project, biofuels project, fossil fuel project that might be on the shelf needs to be taken down and skimmed through really quick. And again, it's fantastic for the state. Again, the only thing we're going to end up being short on in the state is people, which we always have been. But again, in terms of opportunity, with available fossil fuels, with available crops to process and maybe process again, it's really exciting.
Any other questions? Anybody online want to ask a question? Got anything? Seeing none. Thank you so much for that. And that was very informational from a from scientific standpoint. So Stephanie, if you want to go ahead, I'll pull up your PowerPoint here.
Sure. So good morning, Stephanie Sinner, Executive Director at the Soybean Council. And I see Nancy's online from the Growers Association. So thanks for the opportunity to come today and talk about this. I was really glad these two are also in the room with me and some other experts around the table to hit on the technical side of some of this energy items because it is technical. So I did throw together some slides. You all get to be kind of a pilot run on our presentation here today. So we're going to practice on you. Coming into meeting season, we're getting asked to talk more and more about this. So we always throw this up for any group we talk to. There are two organizations that serve the soybean farmers here in North Dakota. You all know Nancy Johnson well. She's Executive Director at the Soybean Growers Association. So they are our membership-based organization working on policy and advocacy work locally here in North Dakota and in DC. I'm with the Soybean Council. We're a team of 7, a board of 12, and it's our job to help administer the checkoff. And so the checkoff, a question we always get, was started by soybean farmers in the late 1980s. 0.5% of the net market value of each bushel of soybeans collected at the first point of sale. So we do everything except policy or regulatory work. So research, promotion, market development, and communications is our sole focus at the direction of the soybean farmers. So there's a federal checkoff, so it is non-refundable, and 50% of what we collect here is sent to our national board, and they work on the same exact vein, but at a national capacity. So we can go next slide. So this year we had our biggest crop of soybeans planted, 7.25 million acres. Last year we were just over 5.5. So a big increase, and then we got a drought. So we'll have our biggest crop planted, but probably one of our lowest years on yield. We typically come in, in that 30 to 35 bushel per acre average. We're probably going to be down in that 24 to 30 range. You all know in this room how spotty the crop has been, farm to farm, county to county, let alone state line to state line. So it'll be interesting to see what we do end up with. Where it's been good, it's been really good. Where it's been bad, it's been really bad. We typically, the soybean crop value in North Dakota ranges between $1.6 to $2 billion. So when we talk about soybeans as an economic driver of the state, it's really not an understatement. Biodiesel and renewable diesel, this is up here for your reading pleasure. I'm not going to go through this, but they are very similar. But I want to talk a little bit on a high level as to what these are and how it can be used today in North Dakota and how it's being used today in some other states to meet these ESGs and our low carbon fuel standards that we're seeing kick into gear. Biodiesel and renewable diesel, they come from those byproducts, those ag products that Dave talked about, soybean canola, rendered animal fats, used cooking oil, and it's really a win-win for our farmers. And for the animal producers because it's just creating extra value for that product as it goes through this process. And it's also a win on the energy side too, because they are able to meet those goals and standards that are being put in place. So biodiesel and renewable diesel are drop-in fuels, so they are ready to go. They can be put in place and use the existing infrastructure that's there. So tanks, pipelines, pumps, without major modification. And so that, I think, is one of the most exciting things about what's happening with biodiesel and renewable diesel. And they can be used in any diesel engine without modification. So that's kind of where we cross into the world of electric vehicles and what's going on there. And I'll touch on that a little bit. Next slide. Pulled this graphic from the Farm Journal article, and literally it's crooked because I pulled it right out of there. And it just was a kind of a nice visual on what's the difference between the three that we actually hear about in North Dakota: renewable diesel, biodiesel, and then sustainable aviation fuel, which is also coming online very quickly. They hit some high points on how they're made. Again, the renewable diesel and biodiesel are those drop-in ready-to-use fuels. And so we're ready to roll with that. And it's a help for our North Dakota farmers, whether they're corn farmers, soybean farmers, livestock producers, they're all gonna benefit from this. We can go next slide. This is a look, this is from the National Biodiesel Board, and credit to them for most of the information we're using here today. So in 1990s was when the soybean industry really realized that we were ending up with this oversupply of soybean oil, and we had to figure out something to do with it. So that's where the biodiesel development started coming online, ramping up and really meeting the industry standards to be able to be used in engines without the old stories of, you know, plugging things and blowing things up, and it really had come a long ways. The other thing too, when we often hear this food versus fuel argument coming back up, you know, a long argument we've heard with the ethanol industry. But the thing about soybean oil is when you crush a bean, you know, it's made into two products. This biofuel and biodiesel, renewable diesel, only uses the soybean oil. So it still leaves that crush, that meal that's left. In 2020, this mix you see up here was the biodiesel market and renewable diesel market was a 3 billion gallon market. So that's how much was consumed in the US. Goal for the industry from National Biodiesel Board is 6 billion gallons by 2030. California leads this charge. We all know that. They alone in 2020 were a 1 billion gallon market. And that's only going to continue to just march upwards. Other states, Washington, Oregon, we're seeing kind of that West Coast increase continue to put in those fuel standards that are driving this demand. Next slide. Headlines we've all seen, right? Some things Dave talked about too. The best thing, and to what Dave said about there being opportunity right now, is that we have biodiesel, we have renewable diesel coming off of our fields right now that can be used today. Companies that are looking to change up how their fleets are run and meet those ESG goals or meet their carbon fuel agreements if they are carbon standard or carbon emissions can drop in these fuels today and start moving the needle on that, start impacting human health and air quality. Next slide. This, you may have seen this. This is the blue dots are biodiesel plants. The orange dots are renewable diesel plants. This is planned and active. So you see our 3 dots in North Dakota. So the 2 orange dots, the small one is the sustainable aviation fuel project that's being worked on out in the Williston area. The bigger dot is the Marathon plant in Dickinson. Right now, this may have changed overnight because it's changing that quickly. The Marathon renewable diesel facility is the 2nd largest in the US. And then you see the Spiritwood, no, that's the ADM plant that's already running. Dave alluded to that. There is some soybean crush happening. The crush in North Dakota that's happening right now for oil is the great thing about it, speaks to the diversity of our ag. It does canola, it does sunflower, it does soybeans, and they can switch that up to meet whatever their demand is. These also do a lot for into the food grade industry. We're also seeing out on the East Coast, the bioheat industry, where they use heating oil in homes and buildings out there. And so they have seen massive switches all up and down the East Coast for using renewable fuel in that, and biodiesel has helped meet that demand out there. We're also seeing rail and marine entities starting to put in place those environmental, social governance goals to meet their emissions. And so we're expecting some big changes coming from the marine, you think of the shipping industry, and you think of consumers that want to trace back, we call it the traceability of their sustainability of the product they're buying, all the way to what fuel is a farmer using in their field, to plant and harvest a soybean crop, to what is the shipper using, to what is the rail line using to move that product. We'll go to the next slide. And you'll see this on the same slide twice because I think it's worth mentioning. Out of that same journal, Farm Journal article, production for soybeans is projected at 90 million acres in the US in 2022, but we need to top 120 million acres by 2024 to meet the demand currently for the renewable and biodiesel pace. So that graph is a good visual to show what that increase is. When you look at the acreage mix across the US and then across North Dakota, that implies some significant changes. Will be interesting to see what happens here. I won't repeat everything Dave said, but another really big exciting piece of this is the opportunity that's coming in the livestock industry for North Dakota, because we are now going to have a growing pile of soybean meal, and that is high quality, high energy, essential amino acids for poultry, swine, dairy, and aquaculture. That's maybe not a word we hear a lot up here in North Dakota, but the domestic production in landlocked states of fish is meeting a demand for protein around the globe, and soy in that diet is a big deal. So that's an exciting area too. There's a couple of entities in southern Minnesota and South Dakota that are currently doing a lot of aquaculture production and research. And if you ever get a chance to visit down there, I would highly encourage that. Would love to see some of that make its way up here and into North Dakota. So I think most everybody knows we currently export 70% of the soybeans grown in North Dakota. They're exported as whole beans. The buyer buys them, they take them into a crush facility, they make them into oil and meal. Now we're going to have the ability to do that here in North Dakota with the ADM plant. Again, to that value add and creating a lower cost feed available here for the livestock industry. So exciting things. This is a big shift in our marketing channels for North Dakota soybean producers. It's a big shift in competition, and it helps diversify their risk management options as well. I think next slide on that, I'll touch on electric vehicles. I am not an EV expert, but I think what I want to stress, obviously our industry is following the electric vehicle industry very closely. It feels kind of like this big dark looming shadow over our renewable fuels portfolio, but the electrification is just in its beginning stages. It's going to take a long time. They're talking about 2040 before the EV technology and infrastructure is really adequately out there to support as widespread of a implementation as they're talking about. The most optimistic forecast that we've seen has less than 5% of the medium and heavy duty trucks being EVs by 2040. So again, I go back to that with existing infrastructure in place, companies, think about cities, garbage companies with trucks, the snow plows, the universities with fleets, the state DOT fleets. Right now, today, you could use biodiesel and renewable diesel in the infrastructure, in the fleets you have without having to do the conversions for your diesel over to electrification, and you can start meeting those goals. So that's really important. I think that's getting missed in the messaging. The purchase price of it, and I'm going to read this because I want to get the numbers right. Class 8 electric truck and battery packs can be upwards of $300,000, and that does not include the charging infrastructure needed to do that. Whereas the purchase of a Class 8 diesel truck that can run on biodiesel with no modifications is about $117,000. So if you're a fleet manager, and I look around the room and I see a few of you that work in that area, when you think about converting all those vehicles, if you could do that without the expense, that's something that folks need to be aware of. We've had really exciting work. If you've been up to Grand Forks in the last year, the Grand Forks Cities Area Transit has a couple of buses that are wrapped with a soybean biodiesel message. They have converted most of their buses over to run on biodiesel with tremendous success. Lower maintenance costs, better emissions that they're meeting. They're spending less time fixing things and replacing parts. And they've had a lot of questions from their bus riders about what that is, because you think about Grand Forks being kind of a metropolitan area in our state, folks want to know what's this all about and how's this making a difference. So it's been an exciting run. We would love to see more city buses transition over to that to help tell that story. Last slide, my 3 takeaways for you. If it sounds like I'm beating a drum, I am. The biodiesel and renewable diesel is available today. I just think the best thing the state can do and the best thing our country can look at is the diversification of our energy mix. We need it all. We need petroleum, we need ethanol, we need biodiesel, we need renewable diesel. We need wind, we need solar. We're not going to make it without a complex portfolio of all of that. Small companies win, cities win, farmers win, energy wins. It all helps make us march closer to those goals. There was a recent study done in 2021 on what switching to biodiesel does for the clean air. Asthma, some statistics up there, up to 45% of cancer risk could be reduced by switching to a B100 blend. And biodiesel helps support our farmers and our rural communities. So that's our message. We have a biodiesel helpline, folks we work with that will actually come out to a farm or a gas station or anybody that's interested in implementing biodiesel and do a tank maintenance assessment and help people understand what they need to make that happen. That's free. So it's exciting. The opportunities are huge for North Dakota, and it's really exciting to see all of this unfold. And I just hope we keep that really diverse mix of energy that's known for North Dakota, and that ag stays a part of that. So I would take any questions and defer any tough questions to the technical experts in the room, but that's about where we're at on that. So that's about it. Kale.
Any questions? Maybe online.
Okay.
Where are you gonna get all those acres from?
The big question. When you figure that out, let me know. You know, where Dave talked to, and I'm sure Ryan's aware of this too, just and so many of you around the table. I know Keith is down there and all of you in ag, but those fertilizer issues that we're seeing this year, and with the port damage down at New Orleans, we're already seeing farmers have to drift away from some corn acres this year, just not because of choice, but because of what's been forced on them by market issues. In the soybean world, we are excited that we see new acres of soybeans each year, as in farmers out west who are growing soybeans on their farm for the very first time. That's really exciting when we have a chance to go out and talk to them about how to help them succeed, how it can help make their operations profitable, what resources the checkoff offers to help support them in that. I don't know what's a sustainable acre number for North Dakota for soybeans, because, you know, we kind of plateau and we go up, we plateau and we go up. That will find a comfort level at some point, because we can't all do one crop. We don't want to lose that diversity for soil health, for pest issues, water quality, all of that, risk management, marketability. You think of the I states, they're fairly well saturated in their corn soy ratio. So I don't know. I think, you know, we get calls from Montana every year for help with their producers looking to grow soybeans. So I think we're just going to see a march west. We learned a lot about drought and irrigation and water management on soybeans this year. So that only lends itself to that. Ryan said earlier, you know, the great thing about this drought year is we got crops off, and that speaks to the research of these crops and the endurability of the varieties and the development that's happening there. So I think this pulls us all together and into the next chapter so that we can meet some of those.
It's interesting to me that some of the national policy discussions are around increasing sustainable acres or conservation acres, and I don't see that happening with the pull to energy, sourcing crops for energy. So the competition for acres is definitely
It's a
real.
real thing, yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you so much. Ryan, if you want to
Sure.
get your PowerPoint pulled up here.
Yeah, good morning, Ryan Thorpe, Fidelity Ethanol, the Chief Operating Officer there. While Cal pulls up my PowerPoint, I'll just give you a little background on the plant itself. A lot of people don't realize this, we are the 6th largest ethanol plant in the US. The Tharaldson family invested $300 million in Castleton back in 2007 and 8 to build the plant. And we continue to reinvest in the plant here that I'll allude to here in a little bit. So yes, we use a large amount of North Dakota's corn crop each year. This year it's a little bit more. It's going to be almost 20% of the entire state of North Dakota's corn. It's going to come to Castleton, and we're going to grind it up. So right now we currently we make ethanol. That normally accounts for about 80% of our revenue at the plant. And then our co-products, we make distiller's grain, and we also make distilled corn oil. So the only thing that we do not currently monetize is our CO2 production. Right now, it goes through a series of scrubbers. We clean it up. We basically vaporize any other emissions. So it's about 99.9% pure. We just release it in the atmosphere currently. We make a large amount of CO2 each day. We make 1,500 tons a day. And if we had a Coke or a Pepsi or some type of large manufacturer that would be relatively close, we've looked at this for years, is how do we capture that value? But currently, to try to transport that, whether you're transporting it down to Minneapolis or some other large metropolitan area, or transporting it out west, out to the oil guys so they can enhance oil recovery, the transportation issue is just too large of a hurdle to overcome. Transportation basically would eat up any potential profit that you could make off the CO2. So it wasn't economically viable to do that. But now we have some other events that have happened here, and it actually happened before the current administration. Back in, I believe, the first, and I'm just going off memory here, around that 2010-12 timeframe, there was a tax credit that was introduced. It didn't really gain any traction because it wasn't large enough. And then in 2018, Congress enacted the 45Q tax credit and increased that tax credit to $50 a ton. And a lot of that was to incentivize projects like this. Is how do we lower our carbon footprint, our carbon emissions? And unfortunately, everything in the world, it takes dollars to get that done. And so Congress enacted the 45Q. So you really started to get some traction. And now the last, the last 12 months here, we've really seen a major swing over to look at everybody's carbon footprint, your carbon intensity. And you have not only certain states implementing their fuel laws, you also have major corporations and major companies, and everybody starting to look at how they're impacting the world based on their carbon emissions. So at the plant, we got approached by the Summit Carbon Solution guys way back in 2019 was our first meeting with them. And then in 2020, we had some further discussions where they were out meeting with different plants, and they found companies that could monetize the 45Q tax credit. And so that's where they really gained their traction. And then we actually signed up with these guys in late 2020, and now they have 31 plants that have committed. It's going to be the largest CO2 sequestration project in the world, and not by a small amount. They're going to sequester 12.5 million tons a year. To give you an idea, second place is around that 8 million metric tons a year. So very, very large project. It's $4.5 billion. It's going to be a 2,000-mile pipeline. It's going to start down in Iowa. So they're going to take plants in Iowa, Nebraska, Minnesota, South Dakota, North Dakota, and we're going to pipe that CO2 out to the Bakken Formation. And currently it's only going to be sequestered. To get the 45Q tax credit, It does have to be sequestered underground for 100 years. And you have to be able to measure that and verify that it stays down in that formation and it does not escape. And that will get you the 45Q tax credit. On top of that, another reason that we signed up is there's already California, Washington, Oregon, and British Columbia that have a low carbon fuel standard for their fuel. There's currently 12 other states that are also looking to adopt some type of a low carbon fuel standard. And we really think, given the current movement, even as close as Minnesota, there's already been talk about Minnesota adopting some type of low carbon fuel standard. So that's why we're looking at this project and also other projects at the plant. What do we do now so that in 10 years and 15 years, we're still in business, and not just in business, we're actually making money and thriving, because we do have this demand base that is shrinking. There's no doubt about it with the electric vehicles, with other fuels, and we're just like the farmer. We're too efficient for our own good. We every day we make more with less. Any farmer, you've seen the yield increases, you've seen the energy increases, efficiency increases. The drought this year is a perfect example of the technology with seed placement and fertilizer placement, and how everything has transitioned, and we're our own worst enemy. We produce more with less. So we've signed up with these guys. We can go to the first slide here. I'll give you a little, just a quick little background on the project itself. You have the 31 plants up there. The Midwest Carbon Express is kind of their nickname for the pipeline. So you see the little dots there on the map. And what they'll do is there's some pipelines that are already there. So it's not going to be one big pipeline. It's going to be a series of little feeder pipelines that gets to the bigger one, eventually making it up its way out to the Bakken Formation. And they picked a very unique spot out west. It's in Oliver, I believe Oliver and Mercer County is where there's not a lot of oil development that's been there. A couple reasons for that. It's not the bottom of the formation, so there's not the most oil there. And also they picked that location because those farmers have not been able to participate in the value of all the oil production and the dollars that come with that. So they were much more open to, hey, let's find a way to get in on some of this cash on the party. So we're going to pay the farmer $50 per acre each year for their ground, and they still get to have everything above it. It's not going to affect anything. We're going to go between 1 and 2 miles down underground into these cavities to permanently sequester that CO2. So the farmer, it's been very well received out there. They're about 2/3 of their way done with the land acquisitions of what they think they're going to need. The testing and surveying is going on right now. Same thing. We're about 80% done with the farmers of where the pipe is going to go. I got to go to those fun meetings here a couple weeks ago. We made the circuit around North Dakota, and I get it. It's not fun. Nobody wants to have a pipeline on their property. It disturbs the soil, it disturbs your crop. It's a pain, but also once I went to the meeting and told them how important this is long term, most of the farmers they understood. They were still upset. They wanted to voice their opinion, but then I said, hey, this is the reason that we can pay $1 over for your corn. This is the reason that corn is $7 a bushel. Without us, you would not see these land values. You would not see these crop prices. Because again, we use about 40% of the entire country's corn crop, and in North Dakota, it's actually closer to 50% of the state's total production is processed at our 5 ethanol plants. So once we explain that, then they're a little more open to it, and also, they're going to get paid for that pretty substantially. It's about 240% the value of that land that they're going to get paid upfront. So once you start talking the dollars, and long term how this is needed, everybody kind of they come around. We can go to the next slide, please. So yeah, here's a better map of the actual pipeline itself. So it's kind of weird. Our pipe is actually going to go slightly east, coming from Castleton, and a couple reasons they picked that. You can see the large shaded areas there kind of in the kind of the peach color. Believe it or not, any of the government land, even though we're following the government programs, they will not let any pipelines go across that. So that's one reason that it kind of zigzags this direction here and there. But yeah, so you can see this again. It's a $4.5 billion project. And they're pretty excited. They have 31 plants currently, and those plants are about 10 million metric tons a year. So there's potential for growth. Same thing. They're building and designing the pipeline so that long term it can be expanded with more compression. They're sizing the pipeline to be able to have it handle this volume and more down the road as the demand for this increases. Next slide, please. So yeah, so again, the reason that we're looking at this project and other projects at the plant is to figure out, okay, what do we do in 10 years, 15 years to have economically sustainability. So again, if you look at this, it's pretty staggering. You know, if you look at the impact that we have on the country, and not only the country, just look at North Dakota alone. You know, every year we value add 640 million to the bottom line of North Dakota. And these are old numbers. We're looking at doing another study. These are 2015 numbers, and we've only increased production in the state since then. And again, 10,000 plus jobs in the state. And those are direct and indirect jobs. So again, just looking at long term, you know, we've been here, it's already been 14 years. And we want to say, okay, what's 20 years from now, not only are we grinding, we're actually grinding more because again, we have the capacity. We think, given our current structure, we make about 175 million gallons a year at the plant. We think we can get to 200 million gallons fairly easy without having to put a lot of money in. And we are up to 3 gallons per bushel for every bushel of corn that we grind. When we first started, it was about 2.8. So eventually, again, with technology and enhancements, we think we can get up to about 3.25 gallons for every bushel. Because at some point you actually run out of stuff to ferment in the corn kernel. But also, we haven't even looked at this. Then you have the corn stover, you have the corn cobs, and there's all kinds of different technology out there. Whether you're looking to make ethanol, looking to make hydrogen, there's all kinds of potentials that we can utilize the plant for. And again, it all goes back to keeping the value right here in North Dakota, keeping the value on the farm. And I go back, the reason we built the plant was the 2007 Energy and Security Act. And I call it one of the greatest legislations that the country has ever passed, because we went from one of the world's largest oil importer. We imported $1 billion of oil a day to now fast forward, here we are, 14 years later, we're one of the world's largest energy exporters. And we export $1 billion of oil a day. So if you look at that transition, it's been ethanol, it's been biodiesel, now renewable diesel, it's been wind, it's been solar. So if you look at this has been the Energy and Security Act. So we don't have to rely on people that don't like us for all of our energy needs. So we made this transition. So again, I call it, one of the greatest pieces of legislation that was ever passed in the US. And I think, is there one more slide? We'll fast forward ahead. So again, just looking at how big this project is, we're hoping to get all of the permitting processing done, get everything in place so that we can be operational in 2024. A lot of that depends on how everything goes. And again, they picked North Dakota for 2 reasons: the Bakken formation out there, but also the state already had the regulatory and the actual policing of the CO2 and how everything is going to work. Not every state has that, because there is another formation in Illinois, which you're right in the middle of the Corn Belt, but it doesn't have the favorable government or the pro business friendly state as North Dakota does. So that's one big plus. So again, we want to just get it to the finish line. You can see the jobs up here that are direct and indirect jobs, and the permanent jobs. I mean, these are jobs, these are really good paying jobs that'll stay here in North Dakota. Out at the plant, I have 54 employees. I have an annual payroll in excess of $6 million. So these are very good, long-term, high-paying jobs. Again, goes back to just that value-added ag in North Dakota. And I go ahead one more slide. I think again, just real quick on the pipeline itself, and you can see where we end up right there in Mercer and Oliver counties. And the third reason that they picked this area is there's not a lot of potential leaks, meaning that there hasn't been a lot of wells drilled out here for oil production. Hence, it's just going to be easier to keep that CO2 sequestered because you don't have nearly the potential leaks that you would have with other areas that are pumping a lot of oil out. Well, there's a lot of holes in the ground. I think that's it. Oh yeah, here's our timeline. So again, it's fairly aggressive. We're call it a third of the way in here right now to really keep the ball moving forward. And hopefully the second quarter there of 2024 is where it's commissioned and started up. So yeah, we're running out of time, but that is my last slide. And I would certainly entertain any questions that anybody has.
Any questions for Ryan?
Yeah.
Brian, ADM is converting some of their plants to jet fuel. Is that any consideration for Tharaldson plant?
Yes and no. So I've been told that they're starting that process, but it's going to take 2 years.
Okay.
So it won't be until 2023 that you fully see them going into that market. So it's good and it's bad. So obviously it's good because we have, again, we're too productive. We make too much of our stuff where we've been oversupplied here for years. And literally we scrape by and we don't make any money. I mean, literally to the point where we only seem to make money when corn is $7 a bushel. And I'm serious. So I was telling Dave before the meeting started, the stars align in the ethanol world only once every 7 years. Literally. So 2006, 2014, and 2021. 2006 was the first start of the corn boom where we actually saw 350 corn for the first time. And since, well, we had that little blip back in 95. So, and then in 2014, again, we were coming off $8 corn. We still had $7 corn, where we made some real profits. And now the stars have aligned here again for last month and this month where we are actually making a very nice profit. So that part is good because we're having our market demand is shrinking. So if we can find other homes for that, that's great. We're not going down that road. We're doing this project. We're also going to put in, we signed a joint venture with Green Plains Renewable Energy. We are going to make high protein distillers. So it's about an $80 million project that we're working at the plant. We're going to start on that next spring. It's about a year to build. So hopefully at this time next year, we'll be up and running with that. We're putting in a letdown turbine, so we're going to make about 75% of our electricity needs at the plant ourselves. We're also putting in a distilled corn oil pre-treatment system so that we can go directly into the renewable diesel plant out in Dickinson. Right now, with your typical corn oil, it can't go straight into the renewable diesel plants. It messes with their catalyst. It raises heck with it, and it's bad. So you have to take these little tiny metals out before it gets into that process. And then it's much easier for them to refine it. So we're going to do all these projects at the plant. In addition to the CO2 pipeline, we're spending about $190 million over the next 4 years. So we're making some substantial investments in the plant so that we are here long term and survive and thriving, not just surviving. So that market that they're looking at too, ADM's the second biggest producer here now in the US. Poet passed them here with their acquisition of Flint Hills. So they have about 500 million gallons. And right now, that's about the market size. Now, hopefully, as more companies transition over, American Airlines has already said it. Now, if we can get Delta and United to follow suit, yes, then we could potentially have a much bigger market. But right now, that would more than supply the market that they have. Yeah.
Quick question.
Yes.
So talking about the relationship with the ag community, the growers. stewardship of the land is really important. And you look at the Red River Valley, some of the best ag, cropland in the world. And then you look at the western part of the state and really places that to build the soil, we've had to do no-till for 30 years, maybe. Is there anything kind of looking in how you run those pipelines that they're going to take that into consideration? Because I know when, in the oil and gas industry in the western part of the state going through croplands, it's similar types of things, but the transmission and gathering lines, you bury them down, you put, you hopefully put the topsoil back as best you can. Compaction just wreaks havoc with those fields. I mean, anything kind of in the offing early on to try to learn from mistakes of the past or things that will get you in trouble with the producers that will just be pissed off.
Yes, no, certainly. They're very aware of that. The nice thing about this pipeline, the pipeline that's coming from Castleton to just north of Hankinson's a 4-inch line. So we're not burying a 30 or 40 or 50-inch line. It's a 4-inch line. Literally, the trench is only going to be a little over a foot wide. So,
but when that crisscrosses your field and there's a 2-foot dip of concrete in the middle of it, it's bad.
correct. So they're going to do their best to put all the soil back. Same thing. There's a lot of drain tile. So the farmers were very concerned about the drain tile. I know they've engaged Ellingson here to help with, hey, let's make it just like it was before. After we're done, we want to make it just like it was before we got here. So yes, and obviously they're going to try and do their best because it is they're going through some of the best soil in the state. But they're very, very aware of that and want to make sure that they work with all the farmers. So yes, the minimum amount of disruption is done.
I remember having a conversation with a farmer sitting on the back of the hay wagon at field days out in western part of the state, and the guy was just sad. This is a person who's had a family farm for years, and he said 30 years I've been building this soil, and we don't know how to renew it right now.
And so here's when I was out on the road, we had 4 meetings. We started at 7 in the morning at Castleton, then we went down to Morton, and then we were over in Foreman, and then we ended up in Oaks. And I was telling the farmers, hey, put it in the easement itself. Whatever language you want, what you want done, put it in there. So that it holds their feet to the fire to do exactly that. And they are more than open and willing to do that because yes, this is a steward of the land, and the project is just for this. So they have the money to do it. And I said, literally, whatever you want, put it in the easement so it's in writing. So they have to abide by it.
Just tag on to what he's saying. This is the first pipeline conversation I've been in where a landowner really kind of is coming first. At least if it's lip service, it's lip service. But when we sat down and it was all right, because they're farmers. Most of the people that are invested in Summit are farmers by trade. We made a lot of money farming. And then the tile conversation with pipeline companies now, they're like, oh my God, we don't want to deal with farmers. That's why we get all tied into it. And it is all the points that you're saying, and it's historically the last 100 years of building pipelines have not gone very well for land stewardship. And I think they're cognitive of this. And so, we just had a oil pipeline come through the valley here not too long ago, and they came in and said, fine, we're going to pay you what it costs to go through the tile, right? So if we have to do tile repair, we do that, or we just pay up front. If this land is ever going to be tiled, what is it going to cost to tile it now with a pipeline through it? And so, as Ryan's saying, they're pretty transparent on put it in your easement, right? If this ground is going to be tiled someday, let's just get it figured out right now instead of having to come back and now deal with pipeline. And as he's saying, the 4-inch pipeline, it's no different than a tile line going through your property. So it's going to be way less invasive than maybe the DAPL was or Keystone or some of those other deals. But I've been very impressed, and I hope it's not lip service.
Yeah, but I mean, literally write it in there. It's the law. So that way, if there's ever any issues, you don't even have to go to court. Say, hey, if you don't do this, we're going to court and you're gonna lose. So
Well, I think too, having,
Mhm.
having folks that tile.
Exactly.
Good plan.
Yes, and they picked Levi and the guys there because they're well known in the valley, but they also said, if you have your guy that you work with and you want, we're gonna work with them. So it's been, again, these are farmers out of Iowa. So again, they have very good soils down there, and yes, so that's why I've been impressed so far. Everything that they said they're gonna do, so far they're doing it. And putting it in writing in the easement goes a long ways towards following through on that.
The sustainability, above ground too.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Good stuff.
Is this different than Project Tundra or is? okay.
So Project Tundra, that's their own project that they're working on,
Okay.
where they have a short pipeline and they're gonna sequester all their CO2 from their production. So this is completely separate.
Okay.
But again, that project is very large because I think they're at about 4 million metric tons a year. So they're like number 4 or 5 on the list for total project size. But yeah, that was completely separate. Yep.
Any other questions for Ryan? How can we get a detailed map of that pipeline route?
Yeah, if you give me your card, I'll shoot you an email where it's a little bit bigger and you can see it. And right now it's just proposed. It's
Right.
proposed. So again, if there needs to be some movement here or there,
Right.
and that's why they've contacted the farmers and they're actually out there doing surveys to make sure geologically it matches up and this is the way that they want to go. So yeah, I use that.
Perfect.
Okay.
There was one more question real quickly
Yeah.
for Stephanie. It was actually going back to the Grand Forks City bus is running the biodiesel. Brenda wanted to see if we could consider a resolution, maybe asking the Fargo Moorhead Metropolitan Area Transit to do likewise. She said she served on the Matt Bus Committee for as recently as 5 years ago, and there's been talks about using more biofuels in the fleet. But there really isn't anybody asking for it. So is there a way that we can, maybe it's not even this committee, maybe it's, how can we get that integrated into the Fargo metropolitan area? But and that can be also an offline conversation too.
Sure, we could definitely come in and visit with you about how I'm drawing a blank on his name out of Grand Forks. You can see his face. The gentleman who runs the Grand Forks Area Transit. Be very happy to come in and talk about what he's seen and the success he's seen. Our target this year, we take a group to the biodiesel conference each year and do a specific training. Our target this year, as was last year, has been fleet managers. So there's opportunities for them to get subsidized education specific to this. So happy to visit it at any point. And-
Well, I'd say too, I know a decade ago, they were using B1 or B2.
Mhm.
So
Well, and on that same line, what the state would.
Yes, so I understand
No
there
idea,
was.
I have no idea the
Yes.
players in this,
I
but.
would love to see the diesel vehicles, because you have towns like New York City who run their plows on B100.
Mhm.
Well, they know winter, they get the winter issues and they're doing it. It's very possible. There was legislation, and I'm gonna look to the screen for Nancy and Brenda and those of you in this world. In the very end of a bill this past year, it was added that it is encouraged that state fleet use renewable fuels,
It's
and that was
encouraged,
ethanol
yep.
and biodiesel.
So we got it in there.
Yes.
We
it
can't
was,
make a mandate, but we encourage the use
Yes.
of renewables in the entire state fleet. So it's written in their policy, but it's just encouraged.
And when I first started in North Dakota, the Ag Department in 2005, there was a Chevy Avalanche on the state fleet that the Ag Commissioner drove, and it was it had an ethanol wrap on it. Would love to see an ethanol wrap, a biodiesel wrap come back and have that, powered by North Dakota farmers in the back of our state fleet vehicles would be.
and I'd love to drive that.
Right?
Yeah.
But I can't lobby for that, so that would be really exciting.
Educate, you're educating.
I am. Anybody with those powers can make it happen.
Just to be mindful of everybody's time, we're about 8 minutes over, so I just wanted to, Nancy, I saw you pop up. Do you have something to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, we can lobby for that, so we are.
Yes.
Just like I said, be mindful of everybody's time. Thank you so much for coming this morning. And if you have the agenda, it's the next meeting will be December 1st. Tentatively, we have a visioning session scheduled with Shannon. So kind of talk about where we want this A committee to go and kind of some of the goals we want to see and some of the things that we want to do. So there might be a change of topic just depending on Levi and I are working to get see when we call on Peterson to come in and have a discussion. So that'll be kind of just depending on that on his schedule. In the January, we won't be meeting just because of the holidays. And then we'll be meeting back up on February 2nd to have really more of an ag tech conversation here. And then some upcoming chamber events. State of the Cities is January 13th. And then our eggs and issues is December 15th next month. And then another date to put on your calendar is May 3rd. We're going to be having a Midwest Energy or Midwest Ag Summit, Agriculture Summit. And so we'll be looking for your insight on that as we look to identify speakers and identify topics that would be very helpful. May 3rd. And it'll be 8 to 11 on May 3rd. So with that, I don't see any more questions. Thank you all so much for coming, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
So Jane,